Hey guys, this is Cody Whitfill. I'll be doing an author read for you guys over my book Manifest here. A little bit about me. I've got two young boys, 3 and 5, and they're thankfully they're asleep right now. But I do have a 3-year-old golden doodle. She's very much awake, so we'll see if she makes an appearance later on. So about Manifest. Going in, I knew I wanted to write about a non-human main character. Tabletops, MMOs, any game I've played, I always shoot for the non-humans. I just hold more appeal for me. I've been a human for a while now, and so I kind of like to branch out. Going in, I knew I wanted to write about a non-human main character. And the more I thought about it, I started wondering, what if each of us had a true self? We just needed a system to help us kind of identify it. So the character creation process in Manifest is a little bit different. Rather than choosing a race or a class or anything like that, you answer a series of questions. This kind of a personality assessment as well. And then the system actually helps you to identify your true race, your true class, your true name, your true self. And so that's kind of where we're going to pick up here, where the main character, Gitch, enters the game world for the first time. So this is one of the chapters of Manifest. I hope you like it. Gitch opened his eyes, feeling a bit groggy, but eager to take in his new surroundings. When he witnessed would be considered a true wonder to any born and raised city boy. He stood at the edge of a grassy glade, facing row after row of towering silver trees. Rays of light peeked through the multicolored canopy, and a trio of finches were singing to the new dawn. A few glowing white boulders and clusters of large spotted toadstools were randomly strewn about the ground. Gone were the smells of big city smog, replaced with fresh air and a hint of... Gitch couldn't quite place it. A large lake sat to his left, with a long mountain range on the far side. Between the lake and himself was another pool, filled to the brim with crystal clear water that bubbled near the center. To his right, a steady stream of golden liquid cascaded along a narrow channel toward the bright trees. He took all this in and more. It was breathtaking. Lily must be smiling down at him. Something awesome was finally happening to him. This starting zone was better than Gitch could have ever hoped for. The area was beautiful, and the glade was a perfect spot to set up a base camp while he scouted the local area for quests and loot. The shimmering stream of gold certainly felt magical, and he assumed it would probably grant some boon upon consumption. Gitch dipped down, intrigued by what type of bonus he would be granted. He was really hoping for an increased leveling speed or a strength buff to help speed along his character progression. Gitch wanted desperately to level as quickly as possible so that he could catch up with his brother, Tommy, or Crokin as he was known in this world. Gitch bent his head forward and confirmed that the strange smell was indeed wafting up from the stream. He decided to just go for it, dunking his whole head in the beautiful golden water. He took a good long gulp and immediately started convulsing. His eyes and nose burned. He lifted his head out of the stream and immediately vomited everywhere. He fell to the ground, gagging repeatedly and coughing up the disgusting water. Between convulsions, he heard a loud voice that reminded him strongly of William Wallace. "Oi, what the hell are you drinking me tinker water?" Horrified, Gitch scrambled away from the flowing tinkle water as fast as he could. He vomited a final time before deciding to find the source of this poisonous piss. Blurry-eyed, he glanced about behind him, and his mouth fell open. Definitely a he, was a giant. He was standing directly in front of a huge stone structure, and a small red dot floated just above his head. Past the structure, Gitch could see the western edge of the glade, which stood in direct contrast to the image of the forest he had first witnessed. Dead trees with spindly limbs made up the great glade's edge. In between the blackened trunks was an underbrush so thick he could barely see through. A thin mist clung to the dead grass on the forest floor, and a dark shadow hung over the whole wood. He was not as enthusiastic about this side of the glade. In fact, he would be perfectly fine never stepping foot in a forest so obviously haunted. Nah, it would be east for him, but first he had to escape the giant. That was a rather large hiccup to his current plan. The giant was easily 5 times as tall as Gitch. Though bald, he had a bushy white beard and a large bulbous nose. His thick eyebrows scrunched together, and a shocked expression was sketched on his craggy face. He was looking directly at Gitch. From what he knew of giants, they were stupid, quick to anger, and immensely territorial. You do not want to get on their bad side, and especially not on their home turf. Gitch was sure drinking the whiz of a giant would be considered taboo among their kind. At least, if done so uninvited. He had to get out of there. He had just a few seconds while the giant was finishing up. It was an image he would rather forget, to be honest. The only cover in his immediate proximity was one of the glowing white boulders. It was narrow, and only twice as tall as Gitch, but it would have to do. Still gasping for air, he stumbled over to the rock. Gitch hid there, trying to determine his next course of action. Talk about a bad life choice, he thought grimly. Lily wasn't smiling at him. No, she was laughing her artificial butt off. He had just drunk the piss of a giant, and she would have probably seen the whole flippin' thing. His eyes were burning, and he could barely breathe. Gitch went to rub his eyes, but his hands never made it to his face. It was his turn to stare in shock, as he looked upon his hands for the first time. His very pink hands. Not a deep rose pink, more of a light salmon color. But what the hell? The color obviously threw him off, but what shocked him even more was the glow. Looking down, he could see he wore only a tattered pair of brown pants and a light brown tunic, but the rest of his body gave off the same pale pink light, and tiny specks of luminescent dust were being released into the air. He glanced back along the direction he had run and saw hundreds of tiny specks leading to his current position, effectively canceling out his attempt at concealment. Obviously, there was no on-off switch, he checked, but he could sense that some of his power was being sent outward for seemingly no reason. He tried mentally canceling the expulsion of pink light from his body, and to his surprise, it actually worked. He was no longer releasing the seemingly radioactive particles, and his skin started to dim somewhat. Thankfully, there were no other immediate changes, besides his feeling a little gassy. He might just get through this encounter unscathed. He carefully peered around the white stone and jumped back when 3 large spears suddenly appeared directly above him. The giant simply picked up the boulder and tossed it nonchalantly across the glade. He just stood there, looking down at Gitch with a slight tilt to his head. He wore a mustard yellow tunic, dark brown pants, and a thick black belt across his waist. His look was that of pure confusion. Well, Gitch thought with just an ounce of optimism, time to lay on the charm. Oh, Gitch began, but stopped abruptly. His voice was nearly as high as an old weenie whistle, though melodic, like the sound of that of a songbird. He had no idea what he was, but decided to trudge along before Beardy got bored and stepped on him, or used his body as a loofah. Oh, mighty giant, he started again. Massive are your arms, and great is your beard. Oh yeah, that sounded pretty good. I bet he liked that, Gitch thought. He looked him up in triumph, but saw that the giant still held that same confused expression on his face. Gitch continued on, both smaller words on account of the giant likely having a case of the dumbs. You is strong, big. I help you. We friends, okay? Gitch said, convinced he got his point across this time. A spark of recognition appeared in Gargantor's eyes. He smiled a big, goofy smile while pointing at Gitch with a long finger. He then pointed at his own mouth and licked his lips. No. Not that kind of friend, Gitch said in a hurry while quickly backing away. The giant did not like seeing his new toy walking away. He lifted his arms and bounded after him. Gitch stood there on trembling knees and waited for the end. His first respawn. Great. And then a terrible thought struck him. What if he respawned back here? The giant may just stick around, and then it would be a never-ending cycle of spawn killing. Crap. His knees gave out in fright as he began softly crying. It was in this moment of despair that he heard a sound that was sweet music to his ears. Not pretty music, because hearing the giant laugh could not be described as pretty, but sweet, because he wasn't dead. Yay! I'm just screwing with you, the giant snorted, trying to get a hold of himself, but failing. He could barely say 2 words without giggling like a loon. You got some oomph on you, lassie. Gitch had expected he'd be more of a bass, given the giant's large frame, but his voice was surprisingly high-pitched. Well, stand up. I ain't gonna eat you, silly. I'm your greeter. He finally stopped laughing and gave Gitch a stern look. That being said, you ever insult me intelligence again, and I will use your little stick body as my new toothbrush. I got some serious plaque, and you look just about the right size to knock it loose. Gitch blanched. Yes, Mr. Giant Sir, I meant no disrespect. I am sure you are the smartest of your kind. The whole forest quivers at your insight. It was not above using copious amounts of flattery to make sure that never happened to him. Nah, I just don't like being reminded is all. Anywho, lassie, I need you to stop calling me sweet self a giant. Giants be walking arguments for birth control. The dumb skulls. Nay, I'd be right proud to say you're in the presence of a gnome. Dwick the Hermit, if it pleases ya. I am the chief of this glade as well as assistant chief and assistant to the assistant chief. It's a perfect setup for me, really. Anyway, who might you be, lassie? Gitch drew himself up to his full height, puffed out his chest, and declared boldly, My name is Gitch, and I am a man. At least he tried to sound bold. It still sounded like a 10-year-old just finished inhaling some helium, which happened to negate any inkling of toughness he tried to impose. The gnome was barely keeping it together. A poorly concealed smirk was peeking through his beard, and he was slightly bouncing from foot to foot. Ooh, you're a fella, are ya? My mistake. I just kinda thought with you being pinkish and all. Nope, definitely a man. A mister, not a sister. What about you? How is it possible you're a gnome anyway? He asked. I always heard gnomes were vertically challenged. All due respect, but you're huge. Where's your hat? All gnomes wear pointy hats. But your racial prejudices? Not all gnomes wear hats, you know, Dwick huffed in obvious disappointment. And size be a matter of perspective. If you were a real man, I may only reach your knees. You, however, are no man. He gave Gitch a sideways glance before continuing. Gitch didn't really care if Dwick wore a bag over her head. What a jerk. To be a man, you would need to be human. You obviously are no human, Dwick stated matter-of-factly. What are you saying? If you're roughly 2 feet tall, and that means I'm... No, that can't be right. What am I? Oh, he chortled gleefully while resuming his foot-hopping dance. I guess you'd be about 4 inches. 6 tops. Don't worry. There are some positives to being midgetly. For instance, if it rains, you're the last to get wet. You're also less likely to be struck by lightning. You have that going for you, so don't sell yourself so short. Dwick gave a hearty laugh. Gitch's mouth dropped open in shock, but Dwick wasn't done. You certainly got a sly look about you, too. Not evil, though, from what I can tell. So I would rule out you being an imp. Nasty devils. Always stealing my goats for their lewd rituals. What was that? Gitch interjected, but Dwick just waved him off. I would also rule out Pixie. You got a tad bit more substance on your bones. You also glow, but pixies tend to sparkle with excitement. Plus, they tend to be nicer. No pixie ever called me dumb, he grumbled sardonically. The gnome was obviously a little sour about Gitch's previous attempt at communication. No, I would say you're a forest fairy. Don't get there out too often, seeing as they are all masters of hiding and trickery. That might just explain the sudden toadstool infestation. Also, your wing style would be a dead giveaway. Imp wings are more bat-like, and pixies have those nifty butterfly wings. You kind of remind me of a mosquito. My what? This was a lot to take in all at once. He again turned his head and could just see the edges of 4 small wings. I can fly? Gitch asked excitedly. I think you need to take a good long look at your teeny self. Follow old Dwick, I have a looking glass inside my house. He turned and started walking away, expecting his tiny companion to follow, which of course he did. As they walked, Gitch asked Dwick another rather important question. So my being a fairy, would that explain what I did back at the stream? He looked up at the gnome hopefully. Gitch needed to try to build back some respect with this guy. Dwick was probably the one who would be granting Gitch his first quest after all. Well, I've heard that fairies have an acute sense for detecting magic. Maybe that led you to my tinkle water in the first place. Gnome piss is highly magical. If you want your sword to glow in the dark, there ain't no better for it. Still, I got no good reason for you dunking your whole head in there. My guess, I think you might just be a twonk. Crap. He wasn't sure what a twonk was, but it sounded very much like idiot. Okay, well, I had my reasons at the time, he mumbled to himself. The stream certainly looked welcoming. How was he supposed to know he would spawn just as the only other sentient creature present was taking a whiz? Oh, maybe he would have known had Lily been a bit more forthcoming. Dwick's powerful ears picked up on his grumbling. And where are you from? Folks are known to drink the pee of others to gain special abilities? He seemed genuinely intrigued by this notion. And no, that is not the case where I come from either. It would actually be considered really perverted. Well, in that case, you're definitely a twonk fairy. Crap. So that is the first chapter where Gitch actually enters the game. I hope you liked it. There's 2 books out currently, Manifest and then Fugitivity is book 2 in the fairy tale series. So yeah, just let me know what you think. Thanks guys, bye.